The number was $312,000. My father-in-law wrote it on a piece of monogrammed stationery, the kind he used for business letters, and slid it across the table like it was a contract. Around us, 63 people sat at white-clothed tables with centerpieces made of real orchids. The ballroom at the Meridian smelled like gardenias and roasted lamb. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my husband's parents' anniversary celebration. 30 years of marriage, a milestone worth honoring, they said. That number on that paper was what they said I owed them for taking their son away. I didn't cry. I didn't stand up and make a scene. I folded the paper, put it in my clutch next to my phone, and sat through the rest of the dinner while 63 people ate their lamb and pretended they hadn't just watched my father-in-law hand me an invoice for my marriage. My husband didn't say a word. That's the part that still gets me even now. Not the paper, not the number, not the orchids. The silence from the man sitting right next to me. I need to back up, because if I just tell you what happened that night, you won't understand why it hit me the way it did. My husband, I'll call him by what his mother always called him in front of me, pointedly, like she was reminding me he belonged to her, is Kevin. We met in our late 20s at a continuing education workshop in downtown Chicago. I'm a forensic accountant. I do financial investigations, fraud detection, litigation support. The kind of work that involves a lot of spreadsheets and depositions and people who thought they were very clever until suddenly they weren't. Kevin is an architect. He designs commercial spaces. He is kind and funny, and for a long time, I thought he was the most emotionally intelligent man I'd ever met. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. We got engaged on a Tuesday night in our apartment over takeout flow because he said he didn't want to wait for a perfect moment. He said I was the perfect moment. I loved that about him. His parents from the very beginning were a different story. His mother, I'll call her what she is, my mother-in-law, made it clear within our first meeting that I was not what she had pictured. She didn't say it directly. She had a particular way of saying things that left a bruise but no fingerprints. She said things like, "It's so interesting that you work in finance." Kevin's ex was a painter, very creative, very warm. She said things like, "You seem very career-focused. That's admirable, I suppose." She said things like, "I just hope my son doesn't lose himself in someone else's ambitions." I smiled through all of it. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself she needed time. She didn't need time. She needed me gone. His father was quieter about it. He was a commercial real estate developer, self-made, genuinely intelligent, and very aware of both those things. He treated me with the particular brand of dismissal reserved for people he considered beneath consideration. Not rude, just absent. Like I was furniture in a room he didn't decorate. Kevin's younger sister was warmer at first, but she was also 22 and still entirely her parents' daughter, which meant her warmth ran about as deep as it needed to run to keep everyone comfortable. Kevin and I got married in a small ceremony. 60 guests, a farm venue outside the city, nothing extravagant. His parents attended. His mother wore a green dress that was close enough to white that 3 people asked if she was the bride. I noticed. I didn't say anything. We bought a condo on the north side. I kept working. Kevin kept working. We were happy, genuinely, in the way that 2 people can be happy when they've built something together and chosen each other on purpose. The problems weren't in our marriage exactly, they were around it. They were every Sunday dinner where his mother made a comment about my cooking or my hours or the fact that we hadn't yet discussed children seriously. They were every family vacation where I was included in the logistics but not in the intimacy, where inside jokes were told, old photos were passed around, and I sat on the outside of a circle that never quite opened to let me in. I kept showing up. I kept trying. I don't know exactly when Kevin started changing. I think it was gradual. The way erosion works, not noticeable until suddenly there's a cliff where there used to be solid ground. His parents had money. Real money. The kind that comes with an estate in Lake Forest and a box at Wrigley and an annual trip to Italy that his mother photographed extensively for people she wanted to impress. Kevin and I were comfortable, but we weren't wealthy, and his parents had a way of reminding him of that distinction without ever saying it directly. They'd offered to pay for things, renovations, trips, just a little something. And each offer came with a thread, invisible at first, then less so. His father started calling more. His mother started having opinions about our condo, our neighborhood, whether we should think about the suburbs, whether we should think about the future. I noticed the threads. Kevin called me paranoid. About 8 months before the anniversary party, things shifted in a way I couldn't ignore. Kevin became distant in the specific way that means someone is having a conversation in their head that they're not having with you yet. He started working late. He started taking calls in the other room. When I asked what was going on, he said he was stressed about a project. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because I was tired of being the person in the marriage who noticed things. Then his mother mentioned the party. It was framed as a celebration. 30 years. The whole family, extended relatives, their close friends. The Meridian, a hotel ballroom in the Gold Coast. A sit-down dinner for 60 plus people. They were hiring a band. There would be speeches. I said of course we'd be there. Kevin seemed relieved in a way that I filed away and didn't examine. I bought a new dress. Navy, knee-length, simple. I thought about the cream dress at our wedding and chose something that couldn't be misread. I got my hair done. I drove us dad in my car because Kevin said he'd had a long week and didn't feel like driving. I should have known something from that alone. Kevin always drove. He liked driving. He said it helped him decompress. But I didn't know. Or I knew and I was still hoping I was wrong. We arrived at the Meridian at 6:30. The lobby was already full of people I recognized and people I didn't. His aunt from Cincinnati, his parents' college friends, his father's business partners, his mother's garden club. Kevin was absorbed immediately. Hugs, handshakes, the warm, familiar pull of people who had known him his whole life. I stood slightly to the side and smiled at people who smiled back with the polite blankness of people who aren't sure who you are. Dinner was at 7. We were seated at the head table, me, Kevin, his sister, her boyfriend, and his parents. The centerpiece between us was a tall arrangement of white orchids. There were small framed photos at each table of the couple through the years. His mother looked radiant in every single one. The first course came. Soup. His mother smiled at me across the arrangement and said, "You look tired, sweetheart. Long week?" I said it had been a normal week. His father gave a toast after the second course. It was polished and warm and talked about legacy and family and the life they had built together. People applauded. His mother dabbed her eyes. Then, between the salad and the entree, his father reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced the folded piece of monogrammed stationery. He didn't make an announcement. He didn't stand up. He simply leaned across his wife, past Kevin, who went very still, and slid the paper to my place setting. "We thought tonight was an appropriate time," his father said, quietly enough that it was only for our end of the table, "to have a frank conversation about what you've cost this family." I looked at Kevin. Kevin looked at his water glass. I opened the paper. The number tenured in $200,000 was written in his father's handwriting, underlined once. Below it was an itemized list. Kevin's graduate school tuition, the portion his parents had paid when Kevin was 26 and they had covered one semester as a gift. The down payment contribution they'd made toward a previous property Kevin had owned before we met and which he'd sold before we married. Several entries labeled simply as family support with dates but no descriptions. And at the bottom, a line that read, "Emotional cost of estrangement from son, Est, $80,000. I read it twice. "We're not asking for immediate payment," his mother said. Her voice was pleasant. Her hands were folded. "We're asking for a decision. Kevin has agreed that this conversation needed to happen." I looked at Kevin again. He was still looking at his water glass. His jaw was tight. He didn't look at me. "Kevin," I said. He looked up. His eyes were red at the edges. "I'm sorry," he said. "They're right that we needed to talk." That's when his sister leaned in and said very quietly, "There's also something Kevin has to tell you." She slid a manila envelope across to him. He didn't take it. It sat there between his bread plate and mine. His mother said, "We've consulted with an attorney. Kevin has been advised." I understood then. This wasn't a conversation. This was an ambush with assigned seating and an open bar. I picked up the monogrammed paper. I looked at it one more time. I put it in my clutch next to my phone. I looked at my father-in-law and said, "Thank you for the itemization." Then I put my napkin on the table, pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked through the ballroom. I didn't rush. I walked past the band setting up in the corner, past the table of his father's business partners, past the coat check, through the lobby, and out the revolving door onto Michigan Avenue. It was October. I hadn't brought a coat because Kevin had said he'd drive. I stood on the sidewalk in my navy dress in 40-degree weather and called a rideshare. I didn't cry until I was inside the car and the driver had already turned up the radio and I realized he couldn't hear me anyway. I was sitting at work, eating a sit and depart for lunch, when by the days of a strong, decisive person who knew exactly what to do, they were the days of someone who sat on the floor of her closet and called her best friend at 2 in the morning and ate cereal for 3 meals in a row because the thought of cooking in the kitchen Kevin and I had picked out together was unbearable. Kevin came home that night. He slept in the guest room without being asked. In the morning, he said he was sorry that things had gotten out of hand, that his parents had pushed the timeline before he was ready. He said he loved me. He said he was confused. He said his parents had been in his ear for over a year. I asked him if he had consulted with an attorney. He looked at the counter. "Kevin, it was just a consultation," he said. I haven't made any decisions." "But you let them hand me a bill at their anniversary dinner, in front of 60 people. You let your mother smile at me and your father slide a piece of paper to my plate and you looked at your water glass." He said he was sorry. He said it several more times over the next several days. His mother called twice. I didn't answer. His father didn't call. His sister sent a text that said, "I think we should talk when you're ready," and I read it and put my phone face down. Here's what I want to tell you about being a forensic accountant. The work is not glamorous. It's not like what you see in movies where someone types furiously and a big red fade lights up on a screen. It's months of documentation. It's cross-referencing bank records with tax filings, with corporate disclosures, with personal statements. It's finding the place where a number was moved one column to the left and understanding exactly why. I had worked a case 2 years earlier involving a family-owned real estate company in the western suburbs. It was a referral from an attorney colleague, a dispute between siblings over their late father's estate. I'd done the initial scope, billed the hours, and closed the file. But during that case, I had run searches on comparable entities in the region, and one of the names that had come up in adjacent property records was a holding company associated with my father-in-law's firm. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. It was a background record. It wasn't relevant to my case. I thought about it now. I went back to my files. I pulled the original research from that case, the surrounding property records, the associated entities, the names on LLCs. I spent 3 nights at my desk doing what I do, which is follow numbers. What I found took me 11 days to document fully. My father-in-law's company had, for at least 6 years, been running a particular kind of arrangement that is technically legal to establish and deeply problematic to operate the way he had been operating it. He had a series of holding companies with shifting ownership structures that he had used to move money between transactions in ways that reduced his tax exposure significantly, not through legitimate tax strategy, but through misclassification of assets and a pattern of related party transactions that his filings did not disclose accurately. He had also accepted funds from investors in 2 development projects and commingled those funds with operating accounts in a way that his investor agreements explicitly prohibited. None of this made the evening news. People don't go to prison for this immediately. But the exposure to the IRS, to his investors, to the state securities regulator was real, significant. The kind of thing that, if surfaced by the right person at the right time, would result in audits, civil suits, and a level of professional embarrassment that someone of his particular vanity would find catastrophic. I documented everything. I was eating a sad granola bar for lunch. I had a colleague I trust review it for completeness. She said it was thorough. Then I did the other thing I had been doing for 11 days, which was talk to a family law attorney. I don't want to go into the full details of those conversations because some of them are still in process and my attorney has been very clear about what I should and shouldn't say publicly. But I will tell you this. The $312,000 figure on that monogrammed paper was not legally enforceable in any jurisdiction I could locate. Gifts made to an adult child, including tuition contributions, down payment assistance, family support, are not recoverable debts absent a signed loan agreement which did not exist. The emotional cost of estrangement line was not a legal instrument. It was intimidation dressed in his father's handwriting. My attorney said it so plainly I almost laughed. She said, "This is a document designed to scare you. It has no teeth." I said, "I know. I just want to make sure I have teeth." She said, "You have teeth." I called Kevin on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after the dinner. He picked up on the first ring. I said, "I want to meet. Not at the apartment, somewhere neutral." We met at a coffee shop in Lincoln Square. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping. He had dark circles and he was wearing a sweater I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago, and I had to look at the table when I first sat down because the grief of it was sudden and sharp. I put a folder on the table between us. I was sitting at work eating a city. Shispazaf. The first is that I love you and I am genuinely uncertain about what comes next for us. I haven't made a final decision. But I need you to understand what you participated in. He nodded. He looked at the folder but didn't touch it. The second thing is that I have spent the last 3 weeks doing what I do professionally. And what I found is that your father has significant legal and financial exposure that he is almost certainly unaware that I am aware of. I'm not going to do anything with this information right now. But I need you to go back to your parents and tell them that the conversation at the Meridian is closed. The paper means nothing. The number means nothing. Any attorney they have retained for any purpose related to a marriage needs to be stood down. Kevin was very quiet. "Tell your father," I said, "that I am a forensic accountant. Tell him that I am thorough. Tell him that I wish all of you nothing but peace. And that peace is precisely what I am asking for in return." I closed the folder. I put it in my bag. Kevin said, "What's in there?" I said, "Let's hope you never find out." He called me that night. He said his father had gone very quiet when Kevin relayed the message. He said his mother had, for the first time in the 3 years I'd known her, not said anything at all. He said his father had gotten up from the dinner table and gone to his office and closed the door. The attorney they had retained sent a letter 2 weeks later confirming they were withdrawing from the matter. No explanation given. His mother has not contacted me since. His father sent one text message that said only "I understand." 2 words, no period. "I am still figuring out my marriage." That's not the ending you might want. The clean one where I walked away triumphant and started over with someone who deserved me. Or the one where Kevin became a completely different person overnight and we rode off into some version of our original happiness. Life doesn't edit itself down to the satisfying version while you're still living in it. What I can tell you is this. Kevin has started seeing a therapist. He goes twice a week. He told me in one of our longer conversations that he had spent his whole adult life trying to earn a form of approval that was never actually on offer, that his parents' love had always had a price list attached, and he'd just never seen it written out in his father's handwriting before. He said watching me walk through that ballroom and out the revolving door without looking back was the first time he understood that he had a choice. I'm still doing my work. I had a case closed last month, a mid-sized company whose CFO had been skimming for 4 years. The CFO thought he was very smart. He had been for a while. Then he wasn't. The $312,000 document is in a folder in my filing cabinet. Not because I need it, because I want to remember the specific feeling of reading that number at a table covered in orchids while my husband looked at his water glass, and then remembering who I was before I ever sat down at that table. I'm a forensic accountant. I follow numbers until they tell me the truth. The number my father in law wrote on that paper told me everything about him. The silence from my husband told me everything I needed to figure out. And the 11 days I spent at my desk, tired, grieving, methodical, reminded me of everything I told myself I was when I was 22 and first learning this work, that the truth is always in the documentation, that the people who think they can bury a number are always wrong. You can move money. You can write a figure on beautiful stationery. You can slide it across a table in a room full of orchids. But you cannot make the numbers disappear. Not from someone who knows where to look. I keep the paper in a folder in my filing cabinet, not because I need it anymore, because of what it reminds me, not of them, but of myself in that moment. Sitting at a table covered in white orchids with 63 people around me, reading a number someone thought would break me. The thing about actions that are meant to humiliate is that they reveal far more about the person who takes them than the person they're aimed at. My father in law believed that a piece of paper with a number on it would make me small. What it actually did was make the situation clear in a way that years of polite dinners and careful silences never had. Sometimes the cruelest thing a person can do to you is show you exactly who they are. It's a gift, even when it doesn't feel like one. I think about what it took to walk through that ballroom. Not running, not crying, not turning around to look for Kevin, just walking, one foot and then the other, past the band and the coat check and out into the October cold without a coat. People ask me sometimes how I did that. And I think the honest answer is that I didn't do it because I was strong in that moment. I did it because every other option felt worse. Begging felt worse. Arguing felt worse. Sitting back down felt worst of all. So I walked. That's not courage. Exactly. But it's what courage looks like from the inside, less like a decision and more like the only thing you can bring yourself to do. The 11 days I spent at my desk afterward were the hardest and most clarifying of my professional life, grieving and methodical at the same time. I was sitting a sad granola bar for lunch. Bend my desk when we tell people a disservice when we tell stories of this kind, as if the person at the center of them knew what they were doing from the beginning. I didn't know. I was sitting at work eating a sad granola bar for lunch when my best friend at 2 in the morning and sitting on my closet floor. And also, I was following the numbers. Both things were true simultaneously. What I know now is that the work, the discipline of returning to the desk, of being rigorous when everything felt unstable, of trusting the process even when I couldn't see the outcome, that was what carried me, not anger. Anger is loud, but it burns fast. What I had was something quieter and more durable. A belief that the truth was in the documentation and that I was capable of finding it. Kevin is in therapy twice a week. I am still figuring out what I want. What I know is that I want a life where the people around me tell the truth, where love is not a ledger, where loyalty is not contingent on silence, where the person sitting next to me looks up when it matters. My father in law wrote 312 seasons on a piece of beautiful stationery and thought that number defined my value. It didn't. What defined me was what I did after I walked out of that ballroom. The choice to be methodical instead of reactive, honest instead of performative, patient enough to let the truth do the work that anger never could. The numbers don't disappear. They never do. Not for him and not for me. The difference is that I know how to read them.